Well, if we are going to get any international cricket this summer, first up for England could be West Indies. What are the chances of them being able to come over and play some cricket in the Test match arena? Well, their Chief Executive of Cricket is Johnny Grave, and he joins myself and Nasser and Ath. How are you, Johnny? How's things treating you in Antigua?
I'm well, thanks, Wardy. We've been in lockdown now for several weeks, so housebound, but there are certainly worse places than where to be.
Absolutely. Now, come on, what chances of you lot coming over and playing some cricket, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, we've had, as you can imagine, lots of conversations individually, and as of the start of this month, we started really a much wider discussion with the ECB over what a tour might look like. Certainly from our point of view, it's really just listening to those ECB plans, both from Steve Elworthy from sort of logistics and venue point of view, and Professor Nick Pearce from a medical point of view. So we're in good dialogue with the ECB, and ultimately we're waiting to hear from them. And clearly they need to get UK government approval before really we can seriously contemplate a tour to the UK.
What needs to happen then? And let's start from your end. Obviously, all of the islands making up the collective West Indies cricket team. How problematic could it be just simply getting them from individual islands, which have individual governments and their own rules in these lockdown, into one place enough to be able to fly over as one to the UK?
Yeah, look, that's certainly one of the challenges that we're going to face. At the moment, there's no regional travel between the main airlines, Liat and Caribbean Airlines. So first up, we need to think through where the pool of players would come from across the Caribbean. We'd expect at least 7 or 8 countries to make up the test squad. And then clearly, I don't think commercial flying is necessarily going to be appropriate here from the medical advice we're getting. So we're looking at chartering planes within the Caribbean, and then ultimately a transatlantic charter to get our team over to England.
You foot the bill for that?
I don't think so, if I'm honest. I think that the spirit in which we've engaged early discussions have very much been that we would pick up the costs as we normally would do on a tour, but anything that would be exceptional would be covered by the England and Wales Cricket Board.
Is it a hard sell at the moment to your players saying go over to the UK, go over to England to play cricket? They'll be online, they'll be picking up their papers, reading about worst death toll in Europe, second highest in the world, and then you're ringing them saying, do you think you can go over to England? Is it a hard sell at the moment, an England tour?
Well, we've not started the sell. I think you're right in terms of global news, relatively few cases here in the Caribbean, therefore very relatively safe from a coronavirus point of view. And then just in terms of sheer numbers of deaths in the UK, obviously over 30,000 people is an enormous number, but in population terms here in the Caribbean, for people that based and have lived most of their lives in these smaller islands, you're talking of 40-50% of the total population. So I think in terms of mindset, it is a very different mindset here in terms of going to, as you sort of describe, what seems as sort of one of the eyes of the storm of this virus. So we're going to have to be very, very careful that first up we take the medical advice that the ECB give us, and then secondly, 100% sure that we're not putting any players' health at risk before we can contemplate the tour taking place.
What are you going at? Sorry.
And just on the back of that, therefore, Johnny, would you allow your players free choice whether they come to England or not? Your players have been to Pakistan recently, your women's team for sure, and it was almost that you allowed them that choice, but gradually they all came to a collective decision to go to Pakistan. Is that how you'd see it happening on the basis of coming to England?
Yeah. I think ultimately we would always give the players the choice. But I think if we get the process right and that it is medically safe to do so by the ECB, the UK government, and then our own medical advisors, that I think ultimately cricketers want to play cricket. It's hugely important to their livelihoods and the survival of our respective organisations and the cricketing world that we can get back to be playing live sport So I think, hopefully the lure of playing England, trying to retain the Wisden Trophy, hopefully will kick in. And as long as we can be absolutely certain that it's going to be safe, yes, we'll ultimately give the players the choice, but I don't expect to be taking a weakened test team to England if we get that far.
Let's say the green light is given and you get the side on the plane and you land in London. As you understand it now, what happens? Would they have to go into quarantine? And how would that affect the physical preparation of the side ahead of playing a test match?
Yeah, look, I think we want a minimum of 4 weeks to prepare in the UK. We'd planned extensively for this tour. And it's obviously a huge disappointment that the exact plans that we had haven't been able to be executed, because we had a sort of 10-day camp here in Antigua planned for our test players in April. We had a 10-day camp planned at the Rose Bowl in Southampton, followed by 3 warm-up games against the England Lions in 2 counties, leading into that first test at the Oval. So what we thought was really robust planning and preparation for our team to acclimatise and prepare. And that's off the back of many of them playing what would have been 10 first-class games of cricket here in the Caribbean, but ended up being just 8 as we had to curtail the season early. So we want 4 weeks to prepare, and if 2 weeks of that was quarantine, I think as long as we were quarantining at a facility where we could train as well, then I don't think that would be a problem. And certainly that's my expectations, is that we would land, we would go to a hotel that also had cricket facilities very near it or within it, that would allow us to be tested, to be quarantined, but also to be able to prepare and train for that first test whenever that may be.
Posts here have moved slightly, they're easing lockdown, which means you can meet up with someone from another household. So the England boys are starting to call their coaches and their fitness gurus to get some work done. What are your boys doing at the moment? I know Jimmy's massive on fitness. Are they keeping themselves fit? Are they netting? Can they do anything?
Yeah, I mean, it does depend across the region. It also depends what facilities the players have within their homes. Many are actually in lockdown within their household. So depending on the size of their yard, their patio, their garden, they can do various levels of fitness work, but it is really restricted just to personal fitness at the moment. And our medical team have been in touch with players, giving them very tailored programs of fitness and strength work that they can do based on their, what they have at home in terms of equipment and also the space they have. But certainly across the region, we're not outside yet training, but we're starting to see governments announce a lifting of restrictions. And so hopefully over the next few weeks, in a similar way to the England players, our players will be able to get outside, particularly the fast bowlers, and start to load up.
I wonder, though, in this crisis, whether Cricket West Indies has a small advantage in the fact that it's quite nimble, small staff compared to ECB. Tom Harrison here is talking about losses of potentially £380 million, which no doubt you'd wince at hearing that. But West Indies is a very different situation, isn't it? Much smaller, much more nimble, and therefore probably less effective. Would that be fair?
Yeah, certainly in terms of revenue. I mean, that's probably a decade's worth of revenue to West Indies cricket. So, yeah, in terms of numbers, it is different. I think in terms of impact, it's similar. But I guess like some of the smaller counties compared to the Test match grounds, there's a similar sort of dynamic at world level. We have a staff of about 50 people full time here in Antigua, and about 125 players under contract. So a much smaller pool of individuals that obviously we're looking first and foremost to protect. And yeah, as long as the ICC revenues flow, they represent almost 40% of our total revenues. So again, yes, we're more dependent on ICC, but also the impact of other revenues don't hit us necessarily as hard as they would the big three in world cricket. That's fair to say.
What, in your understanding, do you think a biosecure venue for a test match would look like, Johnny? And what happens if a player does come down with the virus during the game? Has that been discussed?
Yeah, look, those sort of the level of detail between the medical team and the what ifs is definitely being discussed. But I think if we get the plans right and and we were to get to that stage where our players are in a biosecure environment, I think the chances of getting any player exposed to any level of the virus is very, very low indeed. We're talking, as I said earlier, about the charter flights here in the region, charter flight across the Atlantic to England, and then a lockdown facility where really only the players and support team would be, along with obviously the medical people that would be regularly testing them, as well as hotel staff to sort of cater for their needs. So there'd be very few people in that bubble, and therefore, you're massively reducing the risk of any infection or anyone to get the disease.
Are you under financial pressure to do this, though, to get this happening?
Not in the short term. Part of the joys of international cricket is that when you go away, you pick up the costs of your player fees and the international travel and all the home costs, but more importantly, all the home revenue is retained by the home boards. So there's very little financial reason for us to go over and above. I think as world cricket, we need to be able to demonstrate fairly quickly that we can get cricket back on. And certainly from all the information that I'm given at the moment is that the cricket for the foreseeable future, if it is to take place safely, is going to be behind closed doors in what's now being referred to as biosecure venues. So the sooner we can do that as a game of cricket, then the sooner obviously all the international programme and that giant jigsaw of fixtures can either go ahead as we'd envisaged or needs to be completely rescheduled. And obviously coronavirus has hit when the majority of the world cricket is in its off season. So yes, it's had an impact on IPL, and yes, it's going to have a devastating effect on the ECB as it hits their home summer. But really, as we approach October and all the other boards in the world start to have their home seasons, that's really when we need to get our logistics and advice in place to understand how we can get cricket back on.
I'm going to say behind closed doors, Johnny, not a great deal of difference to some of the test match crowds that you see in the Caribbean. Not when England tour necessarily.
No, I mean, obviously they flock in their droves when England particularly come. And look, we've seen it here in the Caribbean. We've seen it throughout the world, in fact. And I think we've all seen very empty stadiums, particularly when Pakistan play in neutral venues in the UAE. So, but I think the game of cricket, Test cricket in particular, the product isn't really affected too badly on broadcast by lack of spectators.